up, everybody? This is STORYHIVE on location in Vancouver with Vancity, Beats, Eats,
and more.
My name is Kazi, the host of this show. I am so excited to be introducing the wonderful Bisilida Redila. Embodies the spirit of East Van through and through, born and raised in a lively household where music and dance were part of everyday life. She's a proud Britannia grad and the daughter of one of Vancouver's first Filipino nurses. In the early 80s, she discovered breakdancing and became one of the city's first street and club dancers in an all-female crew called Scorpio, dancing on cardboard right on Granville Street. Her love for dance has never faded, from salsa congresses with her daughter to roller dancing inspired by Chicago's JB skate style. Now in her 50s, Bisilda is still learning, still moving, and still deeply rooted in East Van. Let's give a warm welcome.
Thank you, East Van.
I mean, we don't have many East Van originals anymore.
That is true. People are surprised when they find out that I was born here. And yeah.
I found interesting when you sent me a bunch of facts on your bio. It was like that your mom was one of the first nurses to come here from the Philippines.
Yeah, she came to Vancouver. It was probably 1964. And so, yeah, so back in 1964, they all lived together. They rented a house near the hospital and started a life here.
Wow.
So it wasn't about a year later, she sent for my dad, who was still in the Philippines. Like, they were childhood sweethearts. So he came over to Vancouver as well, and he finished his engineering degree at UBC. And that was the start of their life here in Vancouver.
Wow.
Yeah, the Filipino community, I think, was really, really small back then. Because I remember even as a child, people at school not even knowing what the Philippines was. They'd ask me what I was, and I'd say Filipino, and they're like, "What is that?
Yeah. Where is that?"
Yeah. They just, I always kind of just assumed that I was Chinese, and as a kid, I didn't correct anybody. I was like, "Yeah, I'm Filipino." But
what elementary school did you end up going to?
So I went to Queen Victoria for primary school. That's right off Victoria Drive.
Yeah.
And then I went to Grandview Elementary from grade 5 to grade 7, and then Britannia. For high school. My high school days was 1980 to 1985, and even before that, it was East Van. I grew up on the Drive, so I went to Britannia. So the majority of, was Asian. It was probably 90% Chinese.
Whoa.
And but all the other schools too. There was it was East Indian, Italian, Chinese. I think those were the biggest minority communities. And at Britannia, there was probably 2 other Filipino families maybe that had kids that went to Britannia. I think John Oliver, there was and Tupper were the bigger population of the Filipino community.
And so then you grew up as a kid here in the 70s.
I was in elementary school in the 70s. Well, actually, I started grade 8 in 1979. So yeah, I grew up late 60s and all through the 70s in Vancouver, in the same house off Commercial Drive, off McSpadden Avenue. So so I lived on McSpadden from the time I was 2 years old to the time I was, I think, 20. And many people came through our house. So like I mentioned, it was a full house. I remember everything by grades. So when I was around grade 3, my mom brought over her sister from the Philippines, and she had 7 kids. So all of a sudden, there was a lot of us in one house, and it was always, our family loved music. My mom loved dancing. Everybody loved music.
What were they playing in the house at the time?
When I was little, my mom and dad would have parties, and that was the salsa explosion, end of disco, disco / the salsa explosion happened. And so there was a lot of disco and salsa played in the house. And then I had cousins who were older and around in the 70s. So my cousin Eva, she was a disco dancer. So, she would Saturday mornings be cleaning the house, and we'd watch American Bandstand, or she'd put, her music on and teach me moves. Her partner would come and practice with her because she was a disco queen back then.
What?
She was whatever the circuits were in the clubs back then, she would tell me. I think Daddy Longlegs was one of them.
Yeah.
Probably a generation older than me would know the names of the clubs, but She'd bring trophies home. She was in the newspaper, and she was really good.
Oh my gosh. And so then how did you then become introduced to what we call now street dance and club dance?
I think I've always liked dancing. I was like painfully shy as a kid.
Yeah.
But then when music came on, you know, I would dance until someone looked at me, and then I would stop. But I felt it. Yeah. And I think it was just throughout just becoming more social and growing into myself as like a preteen and a teenager, listening to music with my friends.
Do you remember the first time you heard hip hop?
Yeah, it was the Sugar Hill Gang.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the first one. That was probably in grade 8. And also, like, I got to listen to more music than what was played on the radio because one of my older cousins, he was a DJ. So he would throw parties. So I would get to go to his dances because the party scene or the dance scene back then, to me, probably just because I was underage, was DJs throwing parties. They would rent like auditoriums or church halls and just throw parties and sell tickets. So because my cousin was a DJ, you know, I was in grade 7, I got to go and I got to like watch everybody dance and like pick up the dances that they were doing back then in the day, like in the disco, you know, the disco clubs.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's when I fell in love with dance. And then it just carried on when I heard hip hop. Yeah, it just really like resonated with me. I was like, I like this, right? And because back then it was, hip hop was very new, right? It was like, you know.
And to hear it like rapping, you know?
Yeah, that was, that was different, that was new. And I always tell stories about how me and my friends and my family, like my cousins were my friends. They were also dancers, right? So we would go when, that song came out, we'd have our ghetto blaster, you know, put the batteries in, go down to Kids Beach and blast like Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah.
And there would be all this, you know, for some reason back then you had to pick a genre of music. You were either like a headbanger or you were disco or hip hop. Like, what is this rap? Like no one really knew it back then. So, you know, you'd play your music and people would turn that off, you know, like there was actually battles, like the first battles were like playing your music. You know, it was just like who had the biggest mouth.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh my gosh. And so then in terms of like the dance, like seeing, was it breaking that you saw first or popping? Or
I saw a lot of, I did see popping and locking before I saw breakdancing, like actual on the ground breakdancing, because it would be on American Bandstand. You know, it already existed as part of like the disco dances. So it wasn't until I don't even know where I saw breakdancing first. I think it was my little cousins who came to visit.
Yeah.
So I had cousins that came from Guam, and they weren't even teenagers; like they were preteens or really young, but they were breakers. And so me and my brother and my cousins, we were watching them. You know, they had the baggy pants already with the belt, the white tank top. They were breaking on the floor, and we were like, teach us how to do that. So I think it was, younger kids that taught us at, 15, like what breaking was. And then, it started becoming, more visible.
Yeah.
We'd see a bit of it on TV or in movies and stuff like that.
Like breaking.
Yeah, but breaking. Yeah. We had already been introduced before the movies came out, so that's why we were so gung-ho when the movie came out.
Yeah.
Because we could actually see, and like, you'd have to see the movie once in the movie theater, try to remember every move that you saw that you wanted to repeat, because,
you couldn't replay it.
Yeah, we couldn't rewind, we couldn't replay. It's not like we as kids had money to keep going seeing the movie. Like we would just kind of collaboratively, like, what do you remember? Oh, I think he did this, and I think, and just kind of like work it out on the cardboard and just play around and
there's
just
so
have
much
fun with
freedom
it.
In that, where it's like whatever you don't remember, you end up find a pathway to create a move, essentially.
Like our interpretation of what we remembered, we saw, and it just worked, and we were just happy with that, just like, because we were finding something new. We were like creating something new, and although everything we do, we were trying to imitate what we saw, but it was like a really good time.
I'm curious to know, like, and today, the way that the culture has evolved, these dances that now have become codified, like calling it street dance, and it all falls under this umbrella, which includes like hip hop, locking, like breaking, and then the club dances that were born out of the clubs, like whacking and house, etc., etc. And you grew up at a time where you're just seeing this, teaching yourselves, learning where you can learn it from, and then now it's become a whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feel?
It feels surreal, actually.
Yeah.
And I was, everything that I loved as a teen, like roller skating was another one of them. And I picked up roller skating again over the last 3 years. And just like the dance culture and the music of the era that was just like our heyday. Like, I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm kind of like reliving my teens again, but in a more elevated way, because I can take lessons now, it's not just winging it, although that was fun, technique and all this that, is so alive today and thriving in the city. Like, I'm finding out, and I know that I'm only scratching the surface of like the dance scene now that I'm re-entering and taking classes and just meeting people like yourself. And it feels amazing.
I'd love to know, now it's so battle, competition, heavy. Like, those are one of the main ways in which we gather around this art form. Like, what was battle culture like? Did it even exist when you were coming up? Like, what did that look like for you?
We would battle, but it felt more like what you guys call today is like a cipher. So it wasn't it wasn't intense, although we wanted to win the battles. But there weren't so many crews that, like we were all always the same people. Like, we knew who was in the scene and who danced with who. And even though we had crews, it wasn't like you just stayed with that crew. There's a contest happening at this club and you're usually dancing with this crew, but we spread the love. Like, we danced together. We would collaborate and, not just stay with one.
So then, was it within like a club context that these things would happen?
Yeah. So for me, like, it first started, there used to be underage clubs. So, teenagers could go dance and experience like nightlife without the bar part of it. So there was a club in Surrey called Bumpers, and this would have been probably in 1982-ish. We would go there and just battle with each other. There wasn't even a time yet that we actually had crews. We all hung around together, but we would just kind of like all cipher in a circle. That's the only way we really got to know like other dancers, because, no social media, like we didn't phone, like you just saw people real time when you met them. Like, that's the only real time that you meet. Other than that, it's, and it was just once in a while. So, you had crews in Vancouver, downtown, New West, Surrey, and the only time you would ever really meet is like after we grew out of the teen clubs, we would go to like the adult clubs, even though we were still underage. But what happened is that time is breaking was new. Like, adult dancers were starting to hear about, what is this breaking thing? So promoters that had clubs decided that they were going to like have contests. So the only breakers were kids, right? Because all the other dancers were already of age. The lockers and the poppers, they came from the disco era. So they were already established street dancers that were not teenagers anymore, but they were there. But breaking was brand new. So they wanted to kind of, I guess, introduce breaking to entertain the adults that were there. So they opened the doors to the clubs for kids on one day a week, and I think it was Monday nights at Casablanca's. So we would all trek to Casablanca's, and they had like a back room where all of us could stay and practice. It was like a dance floor and a bar. So we would practice and stay over there until it was time for the contest. Then they would call us out like group by group, and we'd go on the floor and do our routine, and then the next group would come up, and then that was kind of like a weekly thing.
Do you think that if growing up you saw like B-girls or dancers that like have a career in this the way that a lot of our friends do now, like would that have?
Dance would have been my life. And if if it was a different time, yeah. So, I don't have any regrets, but like when I say I'm envious, it's because when at that time in my life when I just like the passion or the love for dance clicked for me, it wasn't something that anybody I knew like took dance classes. I thought dance classes were just like, Arthur Murray Ballroom, that kind of thing. Like there weren't any other ones that I heard of. So the concept of even taking a dance class wasn't there. I always had a dream of like, I would have to move to LA to be a dancer. So even when I was in grade 7, that was like a thought because there was a show called Solid Gold.
Okay.
And so it was like a variety show, singers would come on and, they would have the break between and there would be like the dancers that come on and do their routines. And I would always think, I really want to be a solid gold dancer. That's what I want to do with my life. But in order to do that, I have to run away, move to LA to follow my dance dream,
Yeah.
So it always has been like that fire. And if it was available, like, if it was something that was easy to access, I think, yeah, for sure. Like I would have like, who knows? I would have just danced.
Yeah.
Just danced.
Oh, as somebody who grew up without the internet, pre-internet, pre-social media, what does that feel like for you to see that and the emergence of that and how that impacts the way we socialize?
Yeah. It's amazing because it makes the world that much smaller. I'm able to visualize, see things that I would never ever be able to see. People from across the world dancing or skating. But at the same time, it's like overwhelming, like I want to try everything. And so like my mind is already like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. I want to try that. I want to try that. So like the more access you have to see things, it just triggers for me more like, I got it. Now I want to try that. There's so much time and energy that I have. But I think that, it's good. Like it's good. You have to manage. I think you really have to manage your consumption though, because like just being present, like you said, like I didn't know that ever had to become a skill, but now it has to become a skill, right? It was just the way of life. Like, okay, let me learn how to be present. But before it was just that. There was no other way. Yeah. So there's like, pros and cons, the exposure to so many different things that you would never have come across is amazing. But at the same time, because I lived in the time where there was no internet, so I really missed that time, the simplicity of it all.
Yeah.
And that's something that, even if I tried, it'll never be that.
Yeah.
So I do miss that. It's always going to be evolving. It's always going to feel different, right? And through the different stages of my life, like when I've entered like different kinds of dance at different stages of my life. So as a teenager, I was breaking and street dancing.
Yes.
And then, life happens, you get married, you have kids and, don't really focus on what you want to do. But just like the chapters move on, right? There's different chapters.
Get your second life once your kid is independent.
So, my daughter was in high school, so she was a little bit more independent, and I wanted to get back into dance. I danced at parties. Hip hop is always going to be there. That's what our go-to. Anytime at the party, we're all hip hop dancing, doing our old school dances. But I always wanted to try salsa dancing. So when I started taking salsa, I found that a lot of people were in a transition stage of their life. So say you're kind of like middle-aged and, you're starting anew after maybe like a broken relationship or being single for the first time in a long time. That's what I found, like a different kind of community as well. And I found that we all had that same commonality in that we were all fully grown adults, not really dancing, but finding something that we wanted to do for ourselves because we're in a transition part of our life, and it was a common theme. And so it's something that both men and women were doing and meeting up. So it was like kind of like the demographic was like already been married or kids, you know, kind of like in your 30s or your 40s. And so that was a different like dance experience for me. So going into something like totally new, I always loved the music and, you know, I loved the dance as well. And learning that and going out and just being vulnerable, meeting people, dancing with different people and not having to associate it with like a club, like, okay, you know, we're going home, you know, I mean, you know, like anything other than that, right? Just social dancing.
Yes.
That was like another kind of dance experience that I had. And it actually brought my daughter and I closer together because she's just a natural dancer. And she listened to salsa music growing up as well, because in our household, like my partner was Puerto Rican, so played salsa music a lot. And she loved it. And so she was 15 at the time. And I said, you should come to a class with me. Anyways, she ended up loving it. She just dove right into it, even more so than I did. But it was something that we shared together. Like, you know, I have my teenage daughter who wants to spend time with me. Like that was like number one.
Yeah. Aw.
And so that's when we would go to congresses together. And then she took to it so much that she wanted to even like study even more. So she went to New York and she studied with Yamule, which is like the epitome of like salsa, salsa troops. And they wanted her to stay. They wanted her to stay in New York, but she was 16 at 15, 16. She was too young. She didn't want to like leave me for that long. So that was just like kind of like another stage of dance.
And then after that, where did you go?
So after that, I was into salsa and Latin dances for like 7 years. So it was something that I could do by myself. Like as a single woman, I could go to any salsa dance and have fun, enjoy the evening. When I go on a vacation, look up the salsa community there, and I could go by myself and know that I was going to have a good time and meet people and make friends. So after a long stint of like Latin dancing, I just kind of dabbled a little bit here and there. I like took reggaeton classes. I found some people in the hip hop community. You know, I took privates with Natasha. And then I just started taking classes, and I think kind of different places. But right now I'm taking classes with Jojo at his studio. So I've discovered like heels and hip hop, and I just started locking classes with Julian. And so yesterday was my second locking class.
Yeah. Do you remember what you learned?
A little bit.
Yeah. Do you remember what it's called? The moves or whatever?
Yeah. No, he said the moves, but I don't remember what the moves are called. Yeah. But what was like amazing to me was after like we all walked together to Robson Square to lock together, and I literally did that when I was 15. And I was there again, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so weird. It looks the same, just 40 years later. And with the group of people that we were with, like it was so much fun. You know, it was like really just like, you know, dance like no one's watching. You know, it was just fun and freeing.
Other than Robson Square, what were the spaces that you would dance in?
Practices would be, there was like a wrestling mat room at Britannia. So since Britannia was a community center, you know, it was always open like in the evenings and after schools and on the weekends. So that's where a lot of people, you know, came to practice, I guess, the moves that they needed to be safe with. Yeah. Other than that, it was like my house was kind of like a hub. My brother had friends and they all danced, and me and my cousin. And so my family was like really, we had an open door policy. So if there was nowhere to go, we'd be in our backyard. Yeah. Or somebody else's house. You know, we just kind of like gather around. Back then, gallivanting was really like what we did, right? We didn't have a car. Yeah. We just like Saturday morning, just walk around, like go to so-and-so's house, walk to so-and-so's house, and whoever like, whose ever house fit the bill that day the best to like practice, that's where we would go. Or we'd go to like the elementary school, Queen Victoria, you know, anywhere really.
So have you always lived then in East Van?
After I got married in 1990, my my ex-husband, he was from Chicago. So we did move to Chicago after Justine was born.
Okay.
For about just a couple of months, and ended up coming back here. And then I think I tried, there was a short stint that I moved to Surrey, but I always come back to East Van. Like, I don't think I'll ever move from East Van. It's just like home is home.
Yeah.
And, you know, even though the rent is crazy, you know, which is crazy to me because the history of like everybody wanting to leave East Van, you know.
What do you mean?
Like when I was in high school, Commercial Drive was, all the storefronts were like newspaper, closed off. There were no thriving businesses. There was maybe like the barbershop that was there forever and like a couple of corner stores. But as far as like all those windows that you see along Commercial Drive, were
Boarded up.
Boarded up. They were like abandoned buildings. So commercial was like dead. Me and my friends used to be able to roller skate, zigzag down Commercial Drive, both directions, no traffic. Like just, that was our rink. We would, when they opened the 7-Eleven on 12th Avenue, that we were like in heaven. We were like, oh my God, we have access to Slurpees. We have access to Slurpees. So we would just roller skate to 7-Eleven or get our Big Gulp or a Slurpee and roller skate back. That's all we did. So for the girls in like, you know, our neighborhood gang.
Yeah. Barcada.
Our Barcada. We had, we all had roller skates, the girls, and all the boys had BMXs.
Yes.
So, you know, when we'd hang out as a big bunch, you know, the girls meet the boys, what are we going to do today? Like, they just like, we'd roll around, hitch onto their BMXs, like, you know, drive downtown, ride downtown, go through Stanley Park, you know, like all the while, like not drinking water. I think we might buy one, and those big freezies. Yeah. One of us would buy a big freezie and we'd share the freezie. And then power on, you know.
Oh my God!
And keep going through the day. I don't know how, you know, we didn't even feel ourselves. Like drinking water wasn't even a thing.
No, it's all about sugar. Fructose, fructose.
Yeah.
Now I have a question about the East Van cross. When did you first start seeing that? And then now we see it iconicized, immortalized.
Yeah.
There's rumor that it might move because a building is blocking it. I'm like sad about that because I thought it was so sick riding the SkyTrain and then you pass the East Van Cross. I'm talking on Clark Drive and like 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. When do you first remember seeing the East Van Cross around?
To the youngest age that I can remember. It was carved into like every like bus stop bench, like totem poles. It was carved everywhere. And it was even like, it was more carvings than actual graffiti.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, it was, that's where I remember seeing it pretty much like on all the bus stop seats, East Van, carved into it.
Because I can't verify this fully, but this is from like, what knowledge and research I've done, like the East Van Cross was taken from Dogtown, right? Do you know about this?
No, what I grew up knowing about it is it was first a sign created like by the Hells Angels.
Oh.
And so like they were the ones who were like, that's them, that's their mark, right? And they kind of, you know, claimed it. Like nobody would ever walk around with it because like, you know, you're just inviting trouble or whatever.
Right. Associating to a gang.
Yeah. But then, you know, I try to describe to people when they say like East Van Pride, like what is it? And I think it's just comes from earlier, like those early days, like when that was, it stood for, it stood for turf, right? And that's how they marked it, right? It was East Van turf. And so eventually, you know, if you're from East Van, then that's your turf, right? So it kind of went hand in hand. And I think, like, I don't know, I've heard stories along the way that, you know, they didn't like it when people, so I was surprised when I saw that because I was like, because to me, growing up here, it was always taboo to use that specifically.
Unless you were associated.
Yeah. And even to this day, like I would buy, you know, East Van swag or whatever, and there's a little store that I would go to that had it, but they would always get broken into and vandalized because of that, because they were showing in their window that, and the cops would come and like they'd have to say, you know, I would just advise you, like, this is going to keep happening unless you just like take this merch off, you know, because there's people out there that are very territorial about it, and you know they
could be welcoming trouble essentially.
Yeah. So it's like there's still people out there that really feel like ownership of it, where a lot of like people who grew up in East Van for many decades, especially going back to the 60s, it's kind of like an emblem of like the East Van that we know,
right?
The East Van before it became like a hub for anything, right? Before people wanted to live here, when people were like moving out. So that was our pride. It's like, we're from East Van, even if you don't like it and you don't like where we're from and you don't like it here, you know, like we're proud of it and we live here. And this is our hood, and we inject that pride into it. So when I say like East Van pride, like that's what I feel behind it. It's like it's happening now, and it's popular and expensive, and it's a hub now, but it goes back to when, you know, it was just being dissed all the time.
Thank you for sharing that story, by the way. That was really illuminating to hear about the history of East Van Cross. And like when I'm talking about Dogtown, I'm thinking of like Lords of Dogtown. I'm thinking about the skateboarding movement that emerged in Los Angeles and California. And that is how they tagged it, you know, DOG, TOW.
They might have got it from that, right?
You know, but also it's making me think of just like how symbols evolve its meaning over time. Like wearing a red bandana or a blue bandana, and if you grew up in that era where like you don't wear that unless you are from those gangs, you know, to then now seeing kids on the street wearing every color of bandana, and it's just... Speaking of which, it's just fashion, you know?
It's so funny because I still like, I think about that. Like if I have a bandana, I'm like, I don't want red or blue. Like, just in case. Yeah. Like, so that I mean, it sticks with me.
Still, yeah. Well, and the fact that like the East Van Cross now has really become such an emblem.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's why I feel proud of it when I see it on the SkyTrain. But yeah, it's interesting to think of like who out there really look at that and they're just like they're shaking their heads.
There's still people mad out there. Don't come for me, sorry.
I didn't make the sign. It's there. But yeah. Oh man, this hour went by so fast, Bisilda.
Has it been an hour?
Yeah, you were worried. You're like, I don't know if I have enough to talk about. And I'm like, you don't even know. This is gonna go by so fast. We're going to have so many cool things to talk about.
Oh my gosh. It's easy to talk to you. So,
and likewise, I love that we finally got this on record for the archive, and that you were able to share your stories and like really illuminate like a lot of missing pieces that I feel, at least within the street dance and club dance community, we didn't have, you know, of those stories. And now we have really like the beginning, which is cool. You know.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that like through you and meeting like so many like awesome people in the scene now, that I get my second chance. Yes. And I'm just like reliving it, and it's and you guys are amazing.
Yeah. Well, and the community is at a place now, and the culture has like a history now where we have 4 generations. You know, and I forgot who said what about this, but like when you really have that many generations existing, you really now are at a place where like a culture can thrive, you know, because you have history and knowledge keepers, and then you have the next generation. And there's just something so beautiful about like being in this era now, and where I fit in, and I've talked about this a lot on the show, is like I'm in my tita era, I'm in my auntie era, where it's like living for the next gen, but I also feel this responsibility as well as like also keeping the stories of who came before us and honoring and giving flowers to those who came before us, and that like we continue to keep this alive.
I love that, because I'm in my Lola era, so now it's just it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you everybody who's tuned in.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, we brought treats. Good didn't even eat, we didn't even talk.
What do we got?
We're gonna end the show with cracking open these treats and eating them. These are pastries from Libya, actually. Have you been there?
No.
Pastries that are so good. But yeah, Bisilda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, appreciate
Thanks for
everyone
having me.
who's tuned in, who's watching the replay. We appreciate you. We've been broadcasting live on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, what is colonially known as Vancouver, BC, and what we call Vancity. And specifically from us two, repping East Van all day.
All day.
All day, baby. All right. Peace, y'all. Later.
Peace.